All innovators are special people. They're also, in many cases, ordinary people who have special degrees of curiosity or determination or sheer persistence. In this episode, we meet a teacher from Belgium whose interest in technology led him to start an online school, which led him to set up a school in a refugee camp in Kenya, for which he needed a network of online teachers, which grew and grew and grew. Listen closely and you'll hear lessons learned about cultural differences, varied ways of measuring impact, and 3 tactics needed to grow a global community around a worthwhile cause. Spoiler alert, in this case it includes being endorsed by public figures like David Attenborough, Prince William, and conservationist Jane Goodall. All this means that today this softly spoken social entrepreneur and his colleagues sit at the heart of a network of 4.5 million teachers and students from 158 countries, encouraging each other and all of us to take action on climate change. And this, he says, is just the beginning.
You're listening to The Innovator's Journey, a podcast about the lives and careers of creative people, technology, and the future of work, with your host, Jonathan Winter.
Koen Timmers, hello and welcome to The Innovator's Journey.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, to introduce yourself, how would you describe what you do and why you care about it?
I would describe myself as a former educator, bringing climate education globally to teachers and students, basically, as the director of TAG.
And TAG is Take Action Global, so that gives a sense of the scale of it. Now, this podcast is called The Innovator's Journey, and I'd like to hear a little bit about your personal and professional journey. So tell me, where does the Koen Timmers story begin?
So I come from a family of educators. My mom, my aunt, and so many people around me were educators. And so pretty soon I already realized that I wanted to become one myself as well. But the thing with going to school is that sometimes you're getting advice that you're really good at maths and you probably should become an engineer instead. And so I started to go to university to become an engineer, but pretty soon I realized that I really, really wanted to teach young people. I want to explain things. I want them to realize important things as well. And I didn't feel I was able to do that being an engineer.
You said you came from, I think, a relatively normal family in Belgium, not particularly adventurous, and yet you've ended up doing some quite adventurous things. Are there any other influences that gave you a sense of adventure?
I think other influences may include sports. I started to practice karate when I was 13, and it's a complicated sport. And what I really like about it is that you need to be persistent. My goal basically was to become part of the national team. But my trainer told me, it's not going to work for you when you're 18 or 20. It will be more like 27. And so it was, basically.
So it really required some persistence.
Yeah, it did. The sad thing about it is that it only lasted for 2 years because of injuries. But still, I don't regret the journey because it brought me a lot more than just some medals.
It strikes me that it's almost a philosophy as well as a sport, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it can be compared with other sports. It gives you quite special synergies with other competitors. And there's a lot of respect as well. And probably because of that, I also started to love traveling to other countries and meet people from different cultures as well.
So back to the story of Koen Timmers, the teacher. Did you go into classroom teaching after you trained? You started as an engineer, you transferred to teaching, and then did you end up in the classroom?
I did. I've been teaching for 20 years, but I didn't end up with young people. I ended up in adult education where I started to teach web design. The students became friends as well, and it was really great to see their personal growth. I particularly loved teaching them in creative ways, but also really, really love to create course materials. And 20 years already ago, I was thinking, what can we do if we would put those course materials at websites? and create an online school.
Okay, so linking your interest in technology with
Yeah,
your interest in teaching and education.
correct. I noticed that I was really interested in edtech, as they call it, in educational technology from the very beginning, I would say. And yeah, for more than 15 years, I've been running the online school as well, creating websites with an online teacher, basically.
A lot of people might say remote education cannot be as good as classroom education. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that it works pretty well for some areas. We even are using it for to teach different languages, but also our native language, Dutch. And it really works, but there's a big difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning.
So doing things where people are in the same virtual room at the same time, that's synchronous. And asynchronous is doing things kind of when you like in your own time.
Correct? Yeah. And research really shows the synchronous part is really key, apparently.
For making relationships, connections.
Well, for language education, the pronunciation of some words and having the conversation is a crucial part of learning a language, basically. But also, it allows you to ask questions to your tutor. It allows you to give some feedback, which are pretty rough to replicate through emails and other asynchronous communication styles. But for sure, I'm pretty confident to say and to claim that online learning and distance learning really works.
Going back to the theme of travel, we started talking about your international connections, and you told me that in your early 20s, I think when you were training to be a teacher, you had another experience that influenced you and had a big impact, traveling to South Africa. Tell me the story and how it influenced you.
Yep. So I was really lucky to win an award when I got my degree, basically. I created a small tool which allowed you to identify trees.
Identify trees. Great.
Yeah. By watching the leaf of the tree and hitting some buttons in my app, you were able to find the name of the tree, but also the characteristics of the wood, etc., etc. And by that time, you could only do that by using books. So that brought me to South Africa, and it was my first international trip, as in going to a new continent, taking the plane, etc. And it was a great experience with great food and safari. And for me, it was the first time.
And what was most impactful for you?
The most impactful was passing a township. It was the first time I was dealing with this kind of extreme poverty. And I felt helpless as well, because at that time, I didn't have a job yet, and I didn't feel in the right place to help those people.
So what is it that gave you the sense you really could help?
So a lot happened, basically. I've started to teach. I did my master degree, and I've been using technology, and I became part of a community from Microsoft, and I was invited to attend a conference in Seattle at the headquarters of Microsoft. During the conference, there was a session which was called Kakuma, and it's a pretty weird name. We were really, really curious what that would be about, but it's the name of a refugee camp in Kenya. And during that session, we had a Skype meeting with a refugee over there. He practically begged us to help him to raise the bar of education in the camp. Back home, I noticed that was not that easy because there was no electricity, no computers over there. He was just sitting in a library. So what I did is ship my own laptop to the camp. I found some people who were able to share internet connection and people who were willing to go to school, from school to school, basically. And I started to teach the refugees over there, the young people, about science and maths.
Were they in a room together as small groups, or were they individual?
It was groups of 200 people. And,
wow, big groups.
Yeah, big groups. First in the library and then in classrooms. And it was really great to see that they were smiling, they were learning, and it was giving me a really good feeling. But I also noticed that it was quite naive doing it on my own because I had a job already, being a full-time teacher, and this was really taking a lot of time every day, every single day. And so other people were interested in joining the same effort. And after a while, we already had like 100 teachers in 40 different countries in different time zones. We brought new issues, but it was really great to see the sense of community we created over there, being on the same mission and seeing so many teachers are willing to do more than just educating their own children. So that was really inspiring. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to talk more about how that led to large-scale education on the climate. But first, do you have any other reflections on your career so far? Because it sounds like you've managed to combine an interest in technology and in education. And you said you've been invited to speak in lots of places. I was intrigued to see that your TEDx talk is called "When Education Tastes Sweeter Than Winning the Lottery." I thought that's a great title. What did you mean by that?
I'm really proud to make my salary out of education by helping people. It's a win-win for me.
Thank you. Well, before we go on to talk about your latest innovations, I asked you to think about an artefact that represents your creative journey. Koen, tell me what you've chosen.
It will require a small story, basically. My community taught me that you can create your own bioplastic with milk and vinegar only. I learned about it through a teacher in Kazakhstan. And when I was playing with it with my son, we noticed that we were able to create our own Lego minifigure with it. And I always loved using Lego. My son loves playing with it. I'm really keen on creating stuff like do-it-yourself artifacts. And I've been doing this activity with people from around the world, and you can do it in your own color. You can create your own jewelry with this kind of bioplastic. And it is also reminding people about the importance of sustainability. So it would be a bioplastic Lego minifigure.
Fantastic. Sounds amazing, Koen. Well, we'll be back shortly to talk about the latest work you've been doing and your vision for the future of work.
You're listening to The Innovator's Journey, a podcast about the lives and careers of creative people, technology, and the future of work, with your host, Jonathan Winter.
Koen Timmers, we've talked about your work in education combined with technology to help spread education to different parts of the world at scale. And now I'd like to talk with you about your biggest innovation so far, which is to create a platform for innovation in education, focusing on arguably the biggest challenge of our times, climate change.
It is basically a community of practice. It is an online environment which brings together all of the teachers being part of the project. And what is rather new about it is that there have already been two kinds of platforms. One of those is social media, which we all know, like WhatsApp groups and then Facebook. And the other one is learning management systems. This is a kind of platform which is really driven by content. Now, what we wanted is a platform which is driven by people and not only by contents. And so we developed a new platform which allows teachers from across the world to communicate, to co-create, and to run a project with their students in which they are able to share their findings as well. And that part is really crucial because it gives the students information firsthand, not from media like newspapers and the radio, but from each other basically. And the interesting part about climate change is that the causes for climate change are pretty much the same in different continents, but the effects are very different. So people in Florida, they may have hurricanes and they may have floods in Sierra Leone, and there may be a drought in Portugal. But having students sharing this directly with each other is really powerful because it brings the emotional part of the story as well.
Your comment about the reliability of information is interesting, and I'm wondering, there's a tension, I guess, between the high impact we have learning from our friends, and yet that information is not always reliable, certainly in social media. Whereas the scientific information may be reliable, but it's not so impactful because it comes from some distant source that I might not even trust, and it may be in a language that's complex. So how do we resolve this kind of tension between, the impact from friends versus the reliability from science?
Really good question, because the students may have the best intentions but may share wrong information, basically. So what we did is we created a curriculum, and we have been training the teachers, because the teachers have a very important role here. They are not the ones who have to instruct the students, but they need to make sure that they are properly guided, making sure that they have the right information and pointing them in the right direction.
So it's the teacher and the curriculum that really gives it its reliability as a form of education. What led you to choose the climate, by the way, as the subject matter for this network? Because you've done teaching remotely on technology and other subjects, but something changed, I guess, which led you to the climate. What was that?
Imagine you have to teach students in China for 1 hour, and you are the one who can choose a topic. You may think like, I will teach them about trees or about food, or it could be about animals. Well, they may have very different trees, and they may eat different kind of foods and have different animals as well. The thing about climate change is that we all have to deal with it. And that makes it a really interesting topic to teach about. But the more important thing even is that it is very often disregarded in education. It's not part of the national curriculum. And I really believe it has to be, because education is not only about gaining knowledge, it's also about changing your behavior and getting some really important new skills as well.
So you picked a global topic, so it would be relevant anywhere, but also a neglected topic. Why would you say it has been neglected in schools, in education?
A few years ago, Italy and New Zealand were the first countries to bring climate education on board of the national curriculum. After that, there was Mexico and Portugal. But at this stage, UNESCO claims that only 40% of all countries are dealing with climate education. So there's still a long way to go.
So there's a huge gap. What is your ambition for this then?
My ambition is to bring it to all countries. And we took a big step this year, because education had a crucial part of the climate conference by the UN in Dubai. And so many countries have been hopefully influenced by that specific day.
And so I think you said to me that you're reaching something like 4.5 million teachers and students now across 158 countries, and your ambition is many millions.
So 4.5 million people sounds like a good, decent amount of students. But if we would make a deal with the government of the Philippines, we would reach 20 million students in one country only. So that puts things in perspective, I would say.
Right. So you have set your sights high. And there are different ways in which people can engage with your platform.
Yep, the platform is there for teachers, and it is a 6-week engagement. But we are having some small challenges we run with Lego and with other organizations as well, in which students have to work on solutions for climate change. So there's several ways to be engaged. And another one would be through our app we have been creating as part of the project as well.
Now, that's something that sounds pretty innovative to me, because one of the challenges of this kind of platform is demonstrating what impact you're having on people. We can look at the platform and say, well, so many people have logged on, but you don't really know whether it's had an impact on them and whether they've taken action. And I think that the app is part of that, isn't it? Tell me how you measure the impact of what you're doing.
What we notice is that different stakeholders, different groups of people are interested in different kinds of impact as well. So when we speak with press, they are really interested in the stories of impact and the anecdotes. Government people are really interested in the scale of the network. And then we have the teachers themselves who are really interested in the pedagogical part of it. But what we noticed is that the climate scientists, they are only interested in one kind of data, which is the amount of carbon dioxide removed, reduced and avoided. And we realized that we were weak on that part. And that made us decide to work on an algorithm which is transforming the efforts taken by students and more broadly by society as well, translating those kind of actions to the amount of carbon avoided, reduced, and removed.
So the app helps students and their teachers to calculate the carbon impact of the initiatives they're taking.
Correct. The first step of it is that I noticed that many young people have been going on climate strikes. And I also noticed that when they were being interviewed on national television, that they were sometimes sharing information which was not really correct, basically. They were mostly pointing towards governments and industry. And I truly believe that we have an individual responsibility as well. We need to change our behavior and we have to take actions ourselves. So the app is showing a wide variety of actions everyone can take at home. They are culturally relevant as well. And after taking those actions, you can see the amount of carbon you've avoided, or by planting trees, removed, because that is what trees are doing. They are removing carbon dioxide from our air.
So by using the app, students can get inspiration from what other people are doing, and they can also measure the impact of what they're doing.
And it can be used by their parents as well, and essentially by everyone, so also by you. It is a free app. It is available for iOS and Android. And what you can even do is work in teams. So you may have two offices willing to compete to each other for like 2 weeks, or 2 different classrooms in school who are willing to do the same kind of competition.
Okay, sounds good.
Well.
At this point, I think you better tell us the name of the app so we can go and look it up on the App Store.
The app is called Earth Project, in one word.
Earth Project. Okay, good. And you mentioned that it's free. So where does your funding come from? What's the business model for the whole initiative that you're taking?
So TAG is really excellent in creating new free projects. Everything we've been working on is available for free, basically, except for one program, because that program is involving the whole school on a full year journey. So that one comes with a fee. And then we are working with some organizations who are sponsoring our work so we can reach more people.
Okay, so the program Take Action Global depends on sponsors and funding partners for its success.
What makes it really tricky is that we're dealing with climate, which is really contested. So many people are not interested, but they cannot openly claim that they're not interested in doing this.
That's surprising to me. It doesn't feel contested to me these days, especially amongst young people, but you're saying there's still a controversial topic for people to be funding, is it?
It is for sure, yeah. We are living in a highly polarized world, and frankly, the youth activists who are throwing like soup to the Mona Lisa, they're not really helping our cause, because they are making sure that those people who not really believe in climate change or are not sure yet, that they will not support our cause for sure.
Okay, so some of the protests that we're seeing are actually counterproductive. They're having the opposite effect.
They are having the opposite effect for climate education, but they may have a big effect on the government and industries. But climate education is dealing with a different group of people which have to be taken care of in a different fashion as well.
Okay, so who are you reaching then that other people may not be reaching?
We are reaching society, I would say. There has been really interesting research from Lawson claimed that young people have a big influence on their parents as well, on their lifestyle. And so they learn at school, but once they come at home, they are educating their parents.
Okay. I think you told me that research shows especially girls influencing their fathers. Is that right?
Yeah. Girls aged 16 have the highest impact on their fathers indeed. Yeah. And so that proves that climate education goes further than the individual learner as well.
Yeah, interesting. What's been your greatest success and what enabled it to work?
I think the greatest success is uniting people. many organizations have real issues with reaching a lot of people. And for us, that has been the easiest part of it.
What's the secret of connecting people and kind of building that scale of community?
The first thing is the content itself, the mission. People need to be able to join that kind of mission. There has to be a certain belief. But I also noticed that there has to be a true balance between press and public figures and partners as well. So if there are public figures like David Attenborough and Prince William and Jane Goodall, or once they are involved, press will be interested to broadcast the story. And because of that, many new people will join. And because of that, the network will be growing, which is of interest of the public figures. And by bringing in the partners, like the largest educational organizations in 40 different countries, we have been able to grow the network as well. But press and partners are only interested if it is a large-scale project which involves public figures. So there has to be a good balance between those three.
Yeah. Press, partners, and public figures. Yeah, I like that. What's the funniest story you can tell me about your community and the projects they're creating and the impact they're having?
I'm not sure it is funny, but I went to China for 5 days a few years ago to work with students in Beijing. And it was about climate change. And during the first day in the morning, I was giving them a keynote. And the first slide was about Greta Thunberg. So being there for 5 minutes, all of the students were booing me. And I was like, oh no, they're not interested in climate change. And this is going to be like a long 5 days. But by having a conversation with them, I learned that they do care about climate change, but they don't really like Greta Thunberg's style of speaking up to older people and government. And that is something you just don't do in China, speaking up against them, because that simply is part of their culture, not because they are brainwashed.
What an interesting example of cultural differences.
There are so many misconceptions about China as well. We do think that the air is really bad in Beijing, but it is not. It changed very fast during the past 5 years. They brought industry outside the city, and now it's a really clean city with electric cars. So there are a lot of misconceptions.
And in China or in any other part of the world, give me an example of some of the innovative projects that students and teachers have been doing in their classrooms.
So in China in particular, they have been creating gardens on the roofs of the school, basically. But in other parts, we had students in Portugal who came up with solar lights, and a Hollywood actor reached out to us called TJ. And he said, like, I really love the project. And so what he did is bring 200 of those solar lights to the slums in Kenya. And for them, those solar lights are really creating a big difference, because now the students can learn during nighttime, they can study. And what I like about the story is that the students in Portugal not only learned about climate change, they also came to the point in which they created a solution for it. They did it in a very positive way. And in the end, they even changed the lives of their peers in Kenya. And I think that is the kind of quality education we need to strive for.
What a great example of the local creation and local adoption of an innovation from your initiative. That's a fantastic story. Thank you. From your work building up Taking Action Global as a platform for climate education, what have you learned from that about the process of innovation?
What I learned from all of the projects I've been running with TAG is that because of connecting people and making sure that they are having conversations, there's also a growing appreciation for each other's culture as well. They may be in different time zones, speaking a different language and having a different religion, but they may eat the same foods. They may practice football and the same sports. And because of that, all of the participants reflected that there was a higher grade of appreciation for each other. And I think that part is key. We need to make sure that we are having conversations with each other. It's the best way to prevent wars and polarization.
Thank you. And linked with that broader question about innovation, what enables you to be good at this? Is it the persistence you talked about earlier from your karate as a child, or is it something else that enables you to succeed?
I think we all need a mindset in which we acknowledge that we need to continue learning. And I'm really eager of learning about new technologies. And it doesn't necessarily require you to come up with new technology yourself. It could be just like a really clever and creative application. And I think that is what I prefer doing, being creative with technology in a setting of education.
So in 2018, you were announced by Bill Gates as one of the top 10 finalists for the Global Teacher Prize from the Varkey Foundation, which is awarded annually to an exceptional teacher who's made an outstanding contribution to their profession. And you're clearly someone who's done a lot of thinking and writing about education, including your contribution to a book published in 2018, Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which I think makes you well qualified to reflect on where the profession of teaching may be going in the future. So, Koen, I'd be interested to know, if you look 5 or 10 years ahead, how do you think the work of a teacher could have changed?
So the book specifically was created by teachers who don't believe that AI is going to replace a teacher. By that time, there was no ChatGPT and DALL-E, etc. So I already think that AI will have a bigger role than we wrote about, but the teacher is doing more than sharing knowledge. There's also the emotional part. A teacher is noticing when students are not happy, when they are upset, stressed, and all kinds of different emotions are involved. It is a human factor, and I do think that students will always appreciate to be taught by human beings for exactly that reason. I think a teacher has the opportunity to inspire people as well. Critical thinking, being creative, collaboration, problem solving, all of those skills are crucial parts of education. And it's interesting to see that every Minister of Education is having different beliefs as well. Like in India and Canada, they're really about those skills and about collaborative learning as well. While the UK and Belgium are all about knowledge.
Which of those approaches will succeed, do you think, in creating the future we need?
It is really complicated. There's so much research going in both directions, and different researchers are having different beliefs as well. If decision makers are deciding on the right direction, and they often come from academia, in which knowledge is a crucial part, I think the skill-based learning may be in trouble.
Okay, my final 2 questions, Koen. If you had the opportunity to give advice to your younger self, what would you say?
A while ago, I read research about exactly this question, and many people with a certain age were claiming that they really regretted being that much concerned. In most cases, all ends up to be well. And I have been concerned a lot during the past decades, I think, which is probably a human thing. And so I always try to remember that we need to be confident.
Okay, so not be so anxious about the world around us.
But also smaller things, like in your own life, I think.
Okay, yeah. And if you could write a slogan on a giant billboard with your advice for the whole world, what would you say?
Let's work together to change the world for the better.
Great. Koen Timmers, thank you for sharing your story, your innovative work in education to inspire others to take action on the climate emergency, and for sharing your vision for the future of work.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Innovator's Journey with me, Jonathan Winter. If you enjoyed today's story, do share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to make sure you hear future episodes. This podcast was recorded in Riverside, edited and transcribed automatically in Descript, with algorithmic music from SoundDraw and artwork generated with DALL-E. The rest was human.